My name is DJ Soul Sister, and of course we are in the middle of Purple Takeover New Orleans events celebrating Prince's birthday weekend and the surrounding dates. Here in New Orleans, if you were at my party last night at Tippetina's, congratulations for making the cover to come this afternoon. But I'm really excited about today. Today is one of the favorite events as part of the series that I think we've ever done throughout the entire, almost decade that we've been doing this type of series. So let me introduce our special guest. First of all, I want to thank Hotel St. Vincent for making today's event possible.
Yes.
Also being the host hotel for this year's Purple Takeover New Orleans. I also want to give a special shout out to One Book, One New Orleans for recommending our special guest today. And speaking of special guests, introducing him, Liegh McInnis is the author of The Lyrics of Prince, a literary look at a creative musical poet, philosopher, and storyteller. He has presented at the Prince Symposium and the Pop Conference and hosted a podcast titled The Prophetic Pop Life of Prince. He is also the former publisher and editor of Black Magnolia's literary journal and the author of collections of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction related to African American literature, music, and history. He is also an instructor of English at Jackson State University, and as I just learned a few minutes ago, worked with Prince for a bit. So he's going to tell you all about that, and then there will be Q&A afterwards. Please give a very, very warm welcome to our special guest, Liegh McInnis. Thank you.
Please give it up to DJ Soul Sister Melissa. So, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
All right, because I'm going to read a little bit. So, on the flyer, it's the series is Prince as a post-civil rights archetype. And so that's a series in which I do different talks. And so this is, you guys will be hearing for the first time, this is the first new lecture in that series. And the reason I had you guys look at the Controversy album cover is because what I'm going to be discussing is about something that's on that album cover that I think a lot of people have missed. And because they missed it, they've missed a lot about what Prince's career was. So I'll begin now. And again, of course, as we said, I'm looking forward to the Q&A after. So if you disagree, give me all that disagreement at the end. The title of this talk is Rude Boys Reggae Roots, How Prince Constantly Worked to Reclaim Black Music. From his first album to the last, the core of Prince's socio-political agenda was about defining, deconstructing, and reconstructing arbitrary man-made rules about class, race, and gender, so that individuals could exist unshackled to explore the totality of themselves. The problem for most is that Prince often did this implicitly as he also did explicitly, which means that he wasn't always direct or literal in his messages. Yet that was also part of his master plan. He didn't want the regular or traditional pop audience. As Prince stated, quote, "They only come around to check you out when you have another hit. They won't come around to see you when you change directions or try something new. That's the kind of audience I want," close parentheses. He wanted an audience of thinkers who were willing to be challenged in their listening taste and how their listening taste reflected their social political norms about life. Although Prince was defying the established music genre and fashion rules of the black artists in his first two albums, he was still mostly perceived as the R&B heir apparent to Stevie Wonder. Yet with his third and fourth albums, Prince was declaring to the world that he was going to be his own one-man musical and social political movement that would help to dissolve categories that often limited African American artists much more than their white counterparts. The two songs that explicitly declare the social political agenda of Dirty Mind and Controversy are Uptown and, of course, Controversy. In Uptown, he asserts, quote, "Where I'm from, we don't let society tell us how it's supposed to be. Our clothes, our hair, we don't care. It's all about being there." And in Controversy, he declares, "People call me rude. I wish we all knew. I wish there were no black and white. I wish there were no rules." With these two songs, Prince is embracing and presenting his rude boy persona. explicitly. However, the problem is that many fans never understood the etymology or tradition of rude boy, which caused many to miss a great deal of how Prince was using music, lyrics, and fashion collectively to promote his mission of individuality as the essential tool to human liberation and evolution. However, when one considers the explicitly political songs, such as Party Up, Sexuality, and Ronnie Talk to Russia, from these two albums, one realizes that Prince's rude boy persona was about more than just fashion. With his rude boy declaration, Prince became the ultimate rule breaker. Yet many didn't know that he was doing this in the tradition of black music, which had always been, no matter where it was located in the world, the driving force and most reflective aspect of African culture and its socio-political sensibilities. Punk, or punk rock, is often credited as the heavy influence of Prince's Dirty Mind and Controversy albums, which is always seen as a knee-jerk or lazy analysis. It smacks of the hubris or hyperbole that Miles Davis attributes to white critics in his autobiography. Quote, but record companies and white people liked Jimi Hendrix better when he had white guys in his band. Just like a lot of white people like to talk about me when I was doing the Nonette thing, or the Bertha Cool thing, or when I did the albums with Gil Evans or Bill Evans, because they always like to see white people up in black shit so that they can say they had something to do with it. Close quote. Further, when discussing Prince in a documentary, Prince, a Musical Portrait, Miles Davis asserts, quote, white people don't understand that Prince doesn't hear Reveille when he wants to make love to his woman. He hears drums, but they don't understand that shit. Close quote. Using Davis's words as a historical context, Prince wearing the Rude Boy button, which is why I had you look at the Controversy album, wearing the Rude Boy button on his trench coat during the Dirty Mind and Controversy eras seems to imply that Prince was well aware that punk was merely another white interpretation of black music, especially the linear progression of punk as a byproduct of two-tone and ska, which were both outgrowths of reggae. This is specifically true in the manner in which British youth of the 70s reappropriated Jamaican rude boy culture as the ethos of the punk movement. During the 70s, the British economy was in bad shape. Unemployment was high, the youth were angry and disaffected. These conditions created an ideal environment for rebellious, politically motivated punk rockers to cultivate a booming London punk scene. According to the article, The Rude Boy in Jamaican Music, rude boy is a slang term for a subculture that originated from 1960s Jamaican street culture. Quote, in the late 1970s, there was a revival in England of the terms rude boy and rude girl being used to describe fans of two-tone and ska. This revival of the subculture and term was partially the result of Jamaican immigration to the UK and the so-called Windrush generation. The use of these terms moved into the more contemporary ska punk movement as well. In the UK and especially Jamaica, the terms rude boy and rude girl are used in a way similar to gangster, Yankee, yardie, and badman, end quote. Punk was, of course, counterculture, rooted in anarchy in which working class and poor whites sought to dismantle the aristocracy by exposing and denouncing the hypocrisy and lack of authenticity of the ruling class. Thus, the rude boy persona was a perfect tool for British youth to rebel against the monarchy because at its core, to be a rude boy or rude girl was to reject the forcing of the pretentious European culture and sensibilities onto Jamaican people. In this sense, to be rude was to wear one's Jamaican culture as a badge of honor in the face of Afrocentric, read Victorian sensibilities. As such, when Prince dons that rude boy button, he isn't just notating the influence of punk on his musical, lyrical, and fashion aesthetic. He is giving a nod to and reclaiming another form of black/African music in the same way that he spent his entire career, from 1978's I'm Yours to 2015's Hard Rock Lover, reclaiming rock and roll as a black music form. For those who would argue that I'm basing too much of my theory on a button, we must remember three additional points. One, Prince admired Bob Marley enough that he was willing to meet with Marley in 1979 backstage after a show to discuss a possible collaboration. Unfortunately, what's most reported or remembered about that meeting between the two musical icons is Marley being taken aback by Prince's scantily clad and very feminine attire, which caused Marley to cut the meeting short. I love that story. Yet, we should also remember that James Brown wasn't the biggest fan of Prince either. as Brown was put off by Prince's explicit lyrics and that he perceived Prince as stealing his style in a way that he never perceived Michael Jackson as doing so. However, no one ever denied Brown as being an influence on Prince. To this point, then, we should not summarily dismiss that Prince was influenced by or felt a connection with Marley simply because Marley rejected Prince's attempt to connect with him. Of course, sonically, it's easier for casual or non-Prince fans to dismiss Prince's connection to reggae because they don't know that as early as 1982, Prince composed a song in reggae form, If It'll Make You Happy, for possible inclusion on his 1999 album. Then, many years later, Prince wrote the reggae-inspired Blue Light, a personal favorite of my wife, Monica. Yeah, I knew it was going to be some Blue Light fans up there. Which appears on his 1993 Symbol album. Furthermore, throughout his career, Prince made several forays into reggae with varying success with songs such as Repop the Zipper, his rap on his song The Sun, the Moon, and the Stars, the featured rap by Stephen Ranks on Prince's song I Rock, Therefore I Am, and the song Splash. Regardless of how popular or well-crafted these songs may or may not be, it cannot be denied that Prince enjoyed and was influenced by reggae. Third, during his last tour, Prince regularly combined Marley's song Waiting in Vain with his own song If I Was Your Girlfriend, which has been highlighted as one of the major movements of the show. Finally, Marley's Waiting in Vain from his 1977 album Exodus, which is the same name as Prince's 1995 album Exodus, credited to his band New Power Generation. It is fitting that Prince evokes one of Marley's most known albums for his own politically charged album aimed at revealing and denouncing what he saw as corporate exploitation and slavery of artists. In the song, The Exodus Has Begun, Prince sings, spatchcocks in blackface, offer us billions, offer us pennies, when it's millions and millions upon millions that they reap. How in the world can we call ourselves equal when their wages outweigh the time that they keep? If they stood up and behaved like the humans they're supposed to, as opposed to the way that they are not, then this new power soul would not be so soulful, and the water they are in would not be so hot, end quote. With these lines, Prince is evoking the type of spiritual retribution for physical sins and crimes that is a direct troping of Marley's condemnation of slavery, colonization, and corporate greed. To be clear, I am not asserting that Prince didn't like or wasn't influenced by punk or new wave. I am suggesting, however, when Prince is hearing the music and seeing the fashion of punk, he is simultaneously hearing the music and seeing the fashion of ska and reggae, in the same way that the learned ear cannot help but hear the blues whenever one hears a vast amount of rock and roll. Just like one cannot separate rock from the blues, one cannot separate punk from reggae. Returning to Miles Davis, it seems that when Prince heard punk, he didn't hear reveal. He heard the drums and bass of reggae, in the same way that the Police do in their Ghost in the Machine album. In the same way that Eddie Murphy hears the R&B of reggae in the Police's song Roxanne when he sings it in the movie 48 Hours to trope and deconstruct the stereotype that the viewer may initially project onto the character that Murphy is playing. In a sense, by reappropriating a song by a white band that was influenced by black culture, Eddie Murphy is committing the same act of double troping executed by black performers in blackface during the Jim Crow vaudeville era. Essentially, white performers in blackface during that same Jim Crow vaudeville era were exemplifying how white supremacy is schizophrenia, as they were simultaneously objectifying, dehumanizing, and enjoying black culture. It must be made clear that white performers in blackface were no different than slave owners denying the humanity of African people while simultaneously having sex with black women. The best example of this is President Thomas Jefferson, who stated that Phyllis Wheatley didn't have the intelligence to craft poetry while impregnating his slave Sally Hemings multiple times. So when black performers in blackface first take the stage, they are committing the same double trope as Eddie Murphy. On the one hand, which we deem as the literal aspect of the performance, the black performers in blackface are merely presenting the stereotypes that white audiences desire. But on the other hand, which we deem as the metaphoric aspect, the black performers in blackface was signifying, if not mocking, white supremacy as white schizophrenia, especially by showing just how lacking the white performers were in mimicking black culture. The inside joke is that while performing for white audiences, black performers in blackface were mocking the fans familiar of white people who thought they were making fun of black culture. Using Davis's theory, Prince is simultaneously hearing and pushing beyond punk to connect in spirit, if not sonically, with reggae, with his rude boy button as a symbolic wink and nod to the tradition of black music having to invent, reinvent, cloak, and reclaim itself, often in the same song or same movement. Giving punk and new wave too much credit for Dirty Mind and controversy is to ignore or discount the drum and bass that are centered on both albums, especially the song Uptown, the live version of Do It All Night, which affirms that Prince's original bassist Andre Simone is a beast, the song Head, Let's Work, Private Joy, and Do Me Baby. By 1980, white radio and record companies, through segregated departments, had co-opted the guitar and the keyboard so well that any use of them was deemed as rock or attempting to be rock. Therefore, to anchor Dirty Mind and controversy solely as byproducts of punk and new wave is to fall victim to the okie-doke of white media and to the rope-a-dope of Prince, who was using keyboards in a similar manner of how Muhammad Ali played possum on the ropes, making his opponent think that he was injured, just to trick his opponent into overly exerting himself. In this manner, Prince is using keyboards as a dual trope, as an inexpensive way to mimic horns and to provide some sonic ambience of the futuristic sounds of new wave. Musically, Prince was creating a utopia that enabled him to have the best of both worlds. The black R&B funk tradition of horns refashioned at a higher pitch to evoke the sound of the computer age. Brilliantly, this allowed people with segregated ears to hear what they wanted to hear, such as people who loved Elvis and Pat Boone could ignore the sonic roots of Little Richard and Roy Hamilton. Yet these albums are also an artistic execution of the theoretical premise asserted by Funkadelic's song, Who Says a Funk Band Can't Play Rock? In this manner, Prince is crossing over, not in the traditional sense of the term, but in the term used by Prince scholars Dr. Monique Colson and Professor Camila Cummins, who assert that, like Ali's rope-a-dope, Prince was cross-referencing and merging sounds with lyrical ideas and fashion tropes to become everything and his own thing at once. Musically, Prince was not relinquishing or lessening his blackness to appeal to a white audience. To the contrary, he was responding to the call of Funkadelic's rhetorical question by affirming Amir Baraka's notion of the changing same of black culture to force listeners to reconsider their racial definitions of music, especially how those definitions usually, again, limit black musicians much more than they limit white musicians. By wearing the rude boy button, Prince was signifying to his listeners that he was working in the tradition of the artist as activist, as he thumbed his nose and defied the categories designed to encage people. Unfortunately, most people who engage popular music don't recognize irony, subtlety, and nuance as asserted by noted rock journalist Amy Linden on VH1's Four on the Floor. So when a white male journalist writes, quote, "There was no point in flaunting a badge with Rude Boy written on it and then complaining when people lined up to agree," end quote, it's clear that many, if not most of Prince's white fans were and are still unable to perceive Prince as nothing more than an exotic nymph child, as proven by white fans being the most surprised and alienated by the religious and black political messages of the Rainbow Children, that entire album, and then songs such as The Exodus Has Begun, We March, Uncle Sam, Paris 1798430, Don't Play Me, Black Muse, Color, You Will Be Moved, and many more. We must also remember that Prince actually wrote and gave the song We March as a gift to the Million Man March. When Prince released the Rainbow Children album in 2001, so many of his white fans were angered by its rebellious and pro-black messages that it almost imploded Prince.org, which at the time was the most popular Prince fan site. And we can't forget the night that Prince broke the internet when presenting the Grammy for the best album, and he stated, "Albums like books and Black lives still matter." Taking all of this into consideration, I often wonder, what would have been the white perception reception to Prince? What would it have been if the Time would have kept the original lyrics to Jerk Out? which was recorded in 1981 when Prince was regularly wearing that Rude Boy button. So I'm going to read for you the original lyrics to Jerk Out as Prince wrote them. I took her to my crib and tied her up. I figured that was what she liked. Maybe I was wrong, but what the hell, it didn't matter because she was white. I said, how come people in your neighborhood don't like when a brother's rich? Ain't my blood the same color as yours? Answer that question, bitch. It just pisses you off to see me driving a fancy car, don't it? End quote. Although that song was written for the Second Time album, What Time Is It? It wasn't used until their 1990 reunion album, Pandemonium. It's ironic that the Time changed the lyrics since the band was specifically constructed by Prince to be his alter ego to maintain his popularity with the black audience while he began to explore more sounds as his way of challenging what it means to be a black artist. Even more ironic is that the lyrics were inspired by an incident on the Controversy tour when some of the members of the Time band were removed from a flight, quote, jerked out, that's where you get the title from. They were jerked out of the plane for causing a disturbance. The existence of this song makes it clear that Prince was not immune to the daily social political struggles of black people and that he wanted to comment on those struggles in his art. The fact that the black band designed to cater to Prince's black audience found these lyrics too damn controversial for them to sing shows just how rude Prince was in every aspect of the term as a social political define of cultural norms. Early in his career, when Prince writes the song Bambi, a song about a lesbian that does not denounce her for being a lesbian, he's being rude. When Prince writes Party Up, an anti-war song, he's being rude. When Prince writes Dirty Mind, a song that proclaims sexual thoughts as natural, he's being rude. When Prince writes Uptown, a song about a segment of society that has liberated itself from the arbitrary rules of race, gender, and class, he's being rude. When Prince writes Head in 1980, a song not just about oral sex, but about a song that refutes the then notion that black men didn't have to perform oral sex, he's being rude. When Prince writes Controversy, a song that laments the zombie state of humanity because most people accept the man-made boxes designed for them, he's being rude. When Prince writes Sexuality, a song that centers social political liberation in the body and mind of the individual, he's being rude. When Prince writes Ronnie Talk to Russia, a song about the impending nuclear disaster rooted in greed and ego, he's being rude. When Prince writes Sister, a very matter-of-fact presentation of incest, he's being rude. When Prince writes Jack You Off, a song that presents sex as a tool used to alleviate stress and boredom, he's being rude. And when he writes Anti-Christian, a song that proclaims tangible or physical dysfunction as a result of spiritual dysfunction, he's being rude in the most reggae way possible. In all of these songs, Prince is connecting with the tradition of reggae through the lens of punk to reclaim another black creation and use that creation to liberate first black people and then all people from the confines that make it easier for evil people to oppress others. Thank you for listening to me. Every time I turn the page, I go, damn, I'm old. I was like, how many pages is left? Now it's time for y'all to talk. And this is the part I love. I travel and I'm talking to y'all. So any thoughts, any concerns, any pushback about that, or just anything, the floor is open. Doesn't have to be a question, it could be a comment. I'm willing to engage and respond to anybody. So talk to me. Tell me something. Yes, sir?
I got something to say. I ain't go to church this morning. I
appreciate that. Thank you so much. Talk to me.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this wonderful lecture. I'm curious how colorism relates to your theory, to your group way theories about Prince.
Very simple. Well, I usually give the short answer and the long answer. Long answer and the short answer. So the long answer is the reason I position Prince as a post-civil rights archetype. Because for people born, and technically Prince wasn't born before the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, he was born before the 58, right? The Civil Rights Act would come out to him. But he's technically part of that post-civil rights And so those of us who are part of that post-civil rights spectrum, we go through about 3 phases. Integration, assimilation, and then we have a come to Yeshua, well y'all can use that J word for his name, for Jesus who don't know, right? That come to Yeshua, come to Jesus moment of whether or not we're going to take the road of integration of black nationalism. If you look at the trajectory of Prince's career, that's his trajectory. Integration, and then something happens, and he becomes much more nationalistic in his stance, right? When he goes to Baltimore, right, he says to that majority black crowd, the next time I come to Baltimore, I want to play in a theater owned by y'all. The next time I come to Baltimore, I want to sleep in a hotel owned by y'all. Prince gave his music to Tidal because he wanted Jay-Z, a black person, that streaming service. So that's the long answer. He went through that. The short answer is Prince was a victim of colorism. Like every black person, when you live as an African dislocated across the globe under the umbrella of white supremacy, you wait every day being told that you are inferior, ugly, not as good at it. When African people leave their house every day, we are told that there's something wrong with us. And Prince was no different than that. And the linchpin of that, and I've made a lot of Prince fans angry about this, and I tell people, I still like the movie. So it's not like I dislike the movie, but I still like the movie. But the best example of that is Under the Cherry Moon. Now, I love the message of Under the Cherry Moon, right? I love that. The problem with Under the Cherry Moon is not just that you have 2 black men, spend 90 minutes chasing after a white woman. That's not the real problem. I know a lot of people say that's the problem. That's not the real problem. Like some people say, well, yeah, that's the problem. That's the problem. But I promise you, that's not the problem. Does anybody remember? Right, Prince was playing Christopher Tracy. Does anybody remember Christopher Tracy's moment of truth, his moment of clarity? He was scared by the face of a middle-aged black woman. So the colorism is not just that these 2 black men are chasing after this white woman. Somebody on that set, some black person had to say, hey, you cannot use the face of a middle-class black woman to scare the brother straight. That's the ultimate of classism and self-hatred. Does that make sense? So you have Prince going from that moment in 1986. Who, by the way, what's interesting about that is at the same time he's doing that, he's reconstructing the revolution because he's getting ready to fire everybody. And as he's reconstructing it and getting ready to fire everybody, he brings on Jerome, Wally, and Brooks because he's trying to recreate James Brown and the Famous Flames. So the whole problem of colorism and black self-hatred is a complex and nuanced one, which we all battle if we're honest about it. We have to understand that consciousness is not a destination, it's a journey. And so many times as black people, we get to a point where we are conscious and strong in our love of self that we forget when we weren't, and then we point at other black people and not like, hey brother, hey sister, get your stuff together when you just got yourself together 2 minutes ago. So Prince was a victim and pushed, right? Nona Gay, Marvin Gaye's daughter. If you can find it online, you should watch The Beautiful Experience. It's one of my favorite shorts. And The Beautiful Experience has some of the songs that end up in the Gold Experience and some other things in my book. I talk about how those songs kind of get mixed up. But in The Beautiful Experience, Nona Gay actually says, and here's what's important about this. We all know Prince was in control of everything. So Nona Gay doesn't say this unless Prince writes her to say this. So in the song, Most Beautiful Girl in the World, right after that, Nona Gay, because she's typing to Prince, and she says, what do you know of beauty? I know I'm not your style of beauty. Think about that concept. There was no way that didn't get slipped in there. Prince oversees what you wear, what you say. So I'm clear that Prince wrote that. In fact, I know Prince wrote that because we talked about it. So for him to put those words in Nona Gay, a brown-skinned, beautiful black woman, means that he was conscious of, he understood. And remember, he and Spike Lee had been going back and forth to that point about the type of women that Prince had been using. And something that I did not know until maybe 5-6 years ago. Did not know this about 5 or 6 years ago. I did not know that the lady in the Kiss video is Afro-Dutch. Had no clue. Now, again, Mr. Black Country, I ain't even know it's Afro-Dutch people, so let me be really clear. I'm like, it's Afro-Dutch people? Where they be at? Now, to show you, Mississippi, Clarksville, Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, I knew an Afro-Dutch dude. Didn't know he was Afro-Dutch, how you ever remember? So again, you see Prince slowly, from right after Undershirt move, like the kids do, and then making moves to address his own, and then you get finally to the Black Sweat video. And the thing about the Black Sweat video is those of us who have been with Prince and 78 all the way through, whether consciously or self-conscious, you said, when you saw that Black Sweat video, that was a time when a sister that dog would have never been in a Prince video.
Right. Right.
So it meant that, so I think that we treat Prince like we treat everybody. We're all flawed. We're all human. We forget that the reason Malcolm X wrote the autobiography of Malcolm is because he wanted us to see if he could make the journey to loving himself, then we all can make the journey to loving ourselves. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I also just maybe thought it was like a way of queering Black music and a way of living in this liminal kind of ambiguous space that Prince really did.
Oh, no doubt. No,
As
yes.
a way of pushing some kind of stereotype of how people of African descent needed to present themselves in videos.
No,
But it also served this kind of double way of alienating, African descended people because it came off as possibly colorism. But I'm wondering if somehow it had to do with his needing to push the envelope, staying in this liminal space. I don't want to take up a lot.
No, I love your question. I love your question. No, I love your question. I'm here.
Talk about it all.
No. Look, I love your question. I'm here for it. I would say that yes, but Prince did it through gender so much.
And through gender as well.
Right, that he was able to play with race on one way. Prince says, I always forget the brother's name. There was a Prince's primary manager. So Owen Huston was his manager, and then for like a hot second, there was a black guy who was his manager, and then you get what we call the Italian mafia, Cavello mafia, those guys. But between Owen Huston, there was a brother. I never remember the brother's name, but Prince came to him and he said, the reason that the second album looks the way it looks, because Prince said to him, I want people to look at my album and not know what I am.
Yes.
I don't want them to know if I'm male or female. I don't want them to know if I'm black or white, because what Prince understood, in the initial paper for this series, which is Prince as a post-civil rights archetype, I talk about Prince understood. How many people know the British rock group or European rock group Thin Lizzy? Okay, so from Thin Lizzy to Living Color, I think about 13 years, probably more than 13, but 13 years, there was not a black artist on the Billboard's rock charts. Not one. With all the great rock music that was being made, Fishbone, Mother's Finest, right? Parliament Funkadelic, yeah, all that great rock music that was being made. Prince understood, coming from Minnesota, which by the way was the last, Minneapolis was the last radio market to play his music.
Wow.
Can you imagine that? They were the last one to play his music. Cause it's Scandinavian country. Let's be clear. When I first started going to Minneapolis to write my book, it was only the second place I'd ever been where I had to go look for black people. The other was Utah. Of course, right? I got off the plane in Utah, and the brothers and the white guy said, "You must be Liegh McInnis." I said, "How can you think?" He said, "Look around." Of course. I couldn't even be mad at it, right? So, First Avenue. Did you know that First Avenue would not allow black acts to play there? Think of the irony that it's a black artist that puts First Avenue on the map. And when it first started, they had Black Night, because First Avenue, if you First Avenue 17th entry, they have 2 or 3 entries because they have 2 or 3 rooms. The side room, the small room, of course, too. That's where the black acts could be. So Prince was very clear. I need to be non-gendered, non-racial. I need to be a spirit being, right? The problem is that while he was doing that, he was also subliminally dropping messages to the black audience, mostly through dialect. Something that gets missed about under the cherry moon is Tricky and Crystal playing the dozens. That's a specifically black thing, right? So so to your point, Prince understood that for 13 to 15 years, no black artist has been on Billboard's rock radio. And as long as I keep letting them make me an R&B artist and make me this, he even went so far as to lie. He lied about his race, and here's why I got mad at the reporter. He couldn't even get the lie straight. like I detailed like March, I think it's March, April, May, or February, March, April. He changed the lie in 3 straight magazines. Like in the first one parent was black and the other parent was mixed. Then the next month, the other parent was black and the other parent was mixed. I'm like, are the journalists not doing this research? And then by the 3rd magazine, both of them mixed the hell up. Like I'm like, is anybody anybody fact checking? They're like, hey, player, So he could, but my question is, we never got around to this question in the 2 years, 18 months ago, what the other was. I never asked him directly, but I was like, how much were you playing? But remember, if you go back and watch the VH 1-to-1 interview with Chris Rock, he says to Chris Rock, a lot of that was playing. So a lot of it was performative. Because Prince understood that if I let them just call me this black male thing, they're going to think that they can control everything that I can. And for a long time, I'll be clear, for a long time, I was a Prince fan, but I hated that part of it. Until somebody said to me, should you be mad at Prince or should you be mad at the white establishment making him have to jump through those hoops to do that? And then I finally saw an interview with Carlos Santana. If you find this interview, please send it to me because I've been looking for this interview for years. In an MTV interview, Carlos Santana says, because he was talking about the state of music, he says that Prince is one of the greatest guitarists the world has ever had, and he has to do a damn striptease to get noticed. That's coming from Carlos Santana. So Carlos Santana is saying that white people won't let Prince just be great. And then, of course, the apex, right? The guitar solo at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for Wild Mountain Chicago. And white people lost their mind, and black people like, that's
Prince.
Yeah, thank you. And people like, literally, people were calling me after having had a revelation. White people I had talked to again, dude. One dude, I promise I'm not making up. One dude called me and apologized. I'm sorry. I did not know this was Prince. Apology accepted. Like I didn't know, but that was what he was fighting against. So you're exactly right that Prince was playing with all of that. He was code switching at the ultimate, right? Your mama at home cussing all y'all out. Sit your ass down, sit down, hello. Welcome to the McInnis residence. I'm like, who that woman on the phone? So, does that make sense? Thank you so much. More. Question, how much we got? We close to 3 yet?
Well, can you talk a little bit about your 18 months of working with him? You alluded to it, but we didn't hear what it was about.
Yes. So, 2 years prior to that, Prince had just converted to being Jehovah's Witness. And he wanted to write a book. And he liked my book. And I just written an article, I published an article on the Rainbow Church. And he liked that it wasn't just the customary thumbs up really good. He liked that I was exploring the things in the imagery. And so that's what he called it. Now, he called, I'm driving back to Mississippi. I've been at a conference. So I just like telling this story because everybody has a story. And I get a phone call on my cell phone. Pick the phone, Lynn, she's passed now. I can't remember what her name is. Lynn, she calls, she says, I'm Lynn Anderson, Prince's publicist. Prince wants to talk to you about a project. Now, keep in mind, I'm just driving back from a conference, been there all damn week, I'm tired, I'm over it. I got a cousin named John who plays too damn much. And if you got a cousin that can play too damn much, so I say to the lady, look, I don't know who the hell you are, but tell John you play too damn much. Immediately the phone rings again. Sir, I don't know who John is, but Prince is gonna call you in 30 seconds. It'll be in your best interest not to hang up. And then she hangs up. Prince calls, and as all y'all know, because y'all are real Prince fans, I knew that Prince had a deep speaking voice. I always tell people, if they say they met Prince and talk to Prince, they give you that high voice, they lying. So I pick up the phone, I said, hello? Hello? See, this is Prince, are you busy? I go say, yeah, dog, I'm busy, let me get back. And now remember, I'm driving, so I'm trying to keep it moving. And we talked really for an hour that first time. He tells me that he wants to write a book. He's interested in writing a book. The book he wanted to write was about how black people have always used music and religion as part of their political force. Because, you know, when someone is newly converted, and I always tell people like, when Prince converted, he lost his mind. I always tell people, no matter what it is, a new convert is always a zealot. A new vegan is a vegan zealot. You don't want to never meet that new vegan, right? You want to meet that 5, 10-year vegan, right? They over it. But that new vegan, meat eater, killing the society, like, man, come see me in 5 years. So, you know, so those things, a lot of things that he was doing that was putting people off religiously didn't bother me. But of course, I was also from a really strict religious background. So he wanted to write a book about that. He flew me in. The only thing that I kept from those 18 months, because they had my 2 favorite things on it, he faxed me to show you how long ago it was. He faxed me my first itinerary. It has Paisley Park letterhead, and because I didn't have a fax machine, he had to fax it to Jackson State. So as a second generation Jackson State graduate, taught at Jackson State for 25 years, I got Paisley Park and Jackson State on the same thing. That's like one of my favorite things ever. Flew me up. 2 quick things I'll say. Prince, because of his talent, didn't have to learn social etiquette. So Prince didn't have the habit of saying goodbye. So when he talked on the phone, when he was done saying what he said, he just hung up. Or, the first time we met for about an hour, I ain't doing all that, but literally we talked for an hour, great conversation. I looked away and looked back, and like Batman, he was gone. Like just gone. So I'm sitting there at the table. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and finally, man comes in. She's like, is the meeting over? I'm like, oh, hell no, I don't work here. Like, and then she said, did he do that just get up and leave thing? Like, yeah. She said, oh, it's over. Now, the postscript to that was, Prince at that time didn't like you writing in front of him. So I had to run over, there's a hotel that's across from Paisley Park. I had to run to the hotel, remember everything, write it down, I fly back, I type it up, I email it to Lynn gives it to him. He calls me, the next day I get back, he read it all, and he was like, so, this, did you already have that written? I was like, no, that's our conversation, that's what you said. He said, good, he said, that's good. This is the best definition of art I've ever read. And when he said that, I was like, very good then. We can give it this. And the other thing he said was, he said, I know I had the right person. Most people don't work as fast as me. So those 2 things for me. And there were a lot of, the other thing I'll share, because my wife is the star of our marriage, Prince, when he would call, would always be after midnight. And we had that, at that time, we had that one phone with the long cord that would reach all through the house. And remember call waiting used to be that little box? All right, so it's 1 in the morning, it has Chan Hansen on it, right? I don't know anybody else with Chan Hansen, right? Monica, my wife, would answer the phone. He wouldn't say anything. It's Chan Hansen on the box player. So my wife would, hello. Because she would normally be close to the phone with me because I'd be in my office. So she would hang up. Less than a minute later, the phone would ring again. And I would pick up the phone, and he would act like none of that happened. Like none of it.
Wow.
That's cool. You Prince. You do that to a lot of people. You talk about a black woman from Mississippi. So when he would start doing that, my wife, because I couldn't get to the phone, she would just be like, hello. hello. Oh, hello. And I'm like, come on, man. And and by the time I get the phone, he would hang up, call back, I would pick up the phone, and he would go, your wife's hilarious.
Like,
Both of y'all are nuts. Both of y'all. And so we wrote a chapter and we outlined the book. He went to 3 book companies, and unfortunately, nobody wanted a social-political book from Prince at that time. They wanted a book where he talked about all the people whom he had sex. And that's what, and as y'all know how Prince's mind works, if he can't get it out when he wants it out. So yeah, so that was the extent of it, 18 months, and there are a lot of other things. There are some other things that I would like to say, and I like to say, he was ready to talk about his complicated relationship with his father, but not in the ways that people think. I would just say it this way. Prince was very, what's what I want to use? He was not only complimentary, he was very defensive of Joe Jackson. He said, these were Prince's words, he said that Jackson lived in Gary, Indiana, which was the first hood in America. That man got all his children out of the worst hood in America, not one of them in the gang, not one of them addicted to drugs. And then he said, we always talk about black men being in their family, but then when they're there, we talk about how hard they are on their people. So he was ready to talk about his father, and what he said was, my father made me into one of the greatest musicians on the planet. So that doesn't mean that there weren't other things there, but I think that a lot of times when you're on the outside looking in, you project things onto a relationship, and that's the one thing for me that I take as a failure that we didn't get the project done, because he was ready to have those kind, and so why when he starts writing songs like Black Muse and all these other really pro-black songs, they weren't a surprise to me. And I'll end on this. It validated me because when I first published my book in '96, one of the #1 criticisms of my book was, Liegh McInnis has written his book When African American Eyes Making Prince a Black Man. And that was like a diss, by the way. They weren't saying that was a good thing. And getting to know Prince and seeing how their narrative art, right, from integration, like nationalism, for me, as those of us, I like to tell people, black people, David Z, who's an engineer, incensed me. He went on Sunset Sound and he said, and you have to be careful because we're gonna take your word for gold because you were there working. And that's why we need people who know to counter these things. David Z went on Sunset Sound YouTube page and said, well, black people didn't like Prince in the beginning because he didn't sing like the Temptations. Now, here's what's wrong with that. Prince's first 4 albums all charted on the black charts. Prince's first 4 albums were all in heavy rotation on black radio. And every tour up until 1999, by the way, the second half of 1999, was 80% black. And if you look at the cities, black cities, Memphis, Atlanta, Jackson, New Orleans, one of my favorite bootlegs, the New Orleans 1981 bootleg. The very first thing Prince says to me in person, I walk in the Paisley Park, because he read my book, he walked to me, he goes, somebody got a lot of bootlegs. Like literally. And I've never been this quick in my life. I said to him, research purposes only, bro. So that's it. I know we gotta be out here by a certain time, and I don't want to. But I'm here for as long as y'all want to talk, or if y'all ready to go. Yeah, go.
I have a question. Thank you for citing the Funkadelic lyric. Who says
Funk man can't play rock. Yeah.
Rock. What are your thoughts on the connections between Prince and North Clinton Parliament Funkadelic? Has anyone done any work about
Prince. Not only did Prince, George was one of the first artists released on Paisley Park Records. If you haven't heard Cinderella Theory, one of my favorite, I get into this debate with Prince fans about what's the best Paisley Park non-Prince release. For me, it's Cinderella Theory. A lot of people like Eric Leeds' Times Square, there's some other things, but Prince wrote, of course, Prince wrote Right City after seeing Parliament Funkadelic perform. George was another person Prince used to call every night after midnight and talk to George. Prince loved both George and Bootsy. I mean, they were bosom buddies, particularly even after Prince, after 2001, it was George Clinton and Larry Graham. They toured together countlessly. George was a big brother to Prince. Quiet as it's kept, part of the upfront money for Cinderella Theory was to pay off George's taxes. He also did the same thing for Mavis Staples. Gave her that upfront money to pay off taxes. And then said, just come make a record. But yeah, so if you haven't heard, there are 2 songs with the same title. So you have to find the right one. But if you really want to hear George's influence on Prince, go listen to a bootleg called Soul Psychedelic Side.
Oh, yeah.
And there you go. See, and there are 2 of them. But if you hear Soul Psychedelic Side, also, what's the George song? I got the rhythm in my head. I didn't know for a while that there was Prince on guitar. I can't think of the name of it. It'll come to me. But yeah, everybody said Morris, Jimmy Jam, Terry Lewis, they were all big Parliament Funkadelic fans.
I fashion myself as a prominent Funkadelic scholar, so you've inspired me to do some more work when you did that, because Funkadelic had their own issues on Warner Brothers records.
Yep.
Also, so thank you for inspiring me to do some
Yeah.
scholarship around.
And I would say to everybody in this room, we need the real lovers of the art to be the scholars. Because since Prince has died, there's been a whitewashing of who he was in his career. Now, I will give credit to one white sister. If you haven't read the book, what's the name, title of that book? See, Must Be Something Here. Must Be Something Here, or Must Be Something in the Wild. That's the title. Either Must Be Something Here. Because what she does is, the book is not about Prince. The book is about the 100 years of the black community that led up to Prince. And that's important because what white critics often do is make Prince some alien who came down out the sky. They brought hook, line, and sinker the mixed ethos of Prince, right? When both his mother and his father identified as black. When everybody in his family identified as black. He grew up in North Minneapolis, a black household, black neighborhood. And so what she does in that book is she gives you 100 years of these are the musicians, which helped me because in my book, I talk about the after shows. And here's what people need to understand about why Prince did the after shows. The after shows was Prince nodding or giving a historical nod to his father. See, the black musicians in Minneapolis had to learn white standards to make a living. Polkas, any kind of music like that. So they would go to the white side of town, play music from say 7 until midnight, and then go back to the black side of town and have after shows and funk out. That's it. So when Prince started having the after shows, because he and Andre Simone's father, Prince's father and Andre Simone's father, was in a band together. So they would have played in those same after shows together. So that's Prince carrying that tradition. So him connecting with George Clinton, Larry Graham, Patti LaBelle, was him connecting to his father's generation and also understanding, right, watching them not make a living. Right? Prince was very clear. I'm not going to die broke like my father. And we can take that however we want to take that. I don't take that as not respecting. I take it as just the opposite. I take it as him saying that there was no reason for my father to be broke. There was no reason for Cornbread Harris, Jimmy Jam Harris's father, to be broke. There was no reason for Andre Simone's father to be broke. There was no reason for these brilliant black musicians to be broke. And so they did it the straight way. They did it the right. They did it the way. I ain't doing it that damn way. And whatever I got to do to be seen and heard and kick these damn doors open, you either with me or you against me. And so all of that is back to looking at, and we've all looked at folks who come before us and didn't get their just reserved and said, what can we do to do that? So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Yeah.
I have that book. It must be something here.
That's it. Must be something.
Yeah.
There we go.
If,
Yeah.
if anybody wants to borrow it, I have that book.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great book.
I love it.
Yeah. And she also has a radio series that she's interviewing folks to, as a
What's her? Andrew Swenson?
Swenson. Andrew Swenson. Thank you so much. Andrew Swenson. Thank you so much. Yeah. Yes, sir.
So I just want to say thank you. I was born in 1985 in Augusta, Georgia. And if you know anything about Augusta, Georgia, that's where James Brown
Yes.
comes from. And so like you have my grandfather who was born in 1926 who claims that he shows James how to dance.
Right.
And then you got my father born in 1955 who's like, oh yeah, I was supposed to be, you know.
Yeah, I hope you're flying. There you go.
But they went with Boosie.
There you go.
and
No doubt.
OD.
There you go.
But so to be born in like 1985, and I was a weird one, right? Like in a barbershop when people would argue about Michael the Prince, I would always say James.
Right.
Partially because just sonically, James' sound acoustically just makes sense
Yeah.
to us. Like
Yeah.
it's not an electric city.
Right.
So I really appreciate you sort of clear. And for me, like, I guess what brought me to Prince was D'Angelo, right? And so it was weird because D'Angelo and James Brown and Prince is right there in
Yep.
the middle.
Yep.
And I knew that, but I didn't
Right.
know how to quite sort of frame that. And then also I didn't know, my mother's from here, and here she's, Creole. Her father moved them to Detroit where he sort of passed for, you know what I mean?
Right,
All
right.
that.
No doubt.
And so like come out in 1985 and they have these like album covers of Prince and like Rick James and Michael Jackson. Like I didn't know how to, and then I came out of the black Christian album. I didn't know how to like frame and where to put his masculinity and how to like put his sound. So I really appreciate what you clarified there, and I also appreciate the term you use of post-civil rights. I sometimes get into these conversations with white people largely about like the millennial terms, and I'm like, well, yeah, I don't know if I'm like I see that you see me as a millennial, but like I'm signifying on a different tradition,
exactly.
or like I'm one generation removed from not being able to go to college, so
See,
it's
there you
not
go.
the same sort of thing. So I really appreciate sort of hearing some of that clarity.
thank you.
because I don't get to have that a lot. So thank you.
And what you're speaking to is inside the community, African people, or black people, depending on how you want to identify. We knew we weren't the monolith. It's outside the community. Because what happens is that every 10 years, we talk about every 10 years, black people have to refashion themselves. Well, the reason we have to kind of refashion ourselves every 10 years is because by every 10 years, the white culture co-opts whatever we create. So if the white culture is co-opting what you create, then you're forced to make something else. And so, as Amir Baraka calls it, change insane, there's all these spin-offs, but the reason that you're able to do it is particularly because you're not a monolith. See, if you were a monolith, the one thing they took, you wouldn't be able to create anything else. But because when you talk about, if you talk about, like, I'm from Clarksville, Mississippi, home of the blues, right? The 5 people from Clarksville, this is gonna fit everybody in the room but you. The 5 people from Clarksville, my starting 5, will crush any 5 from anywhere else.
Talk about it.
I'm just like, when people say, well, no, my 5.
Give it.
Because I'm gonna start with W.C. Handy, the game over there.
Okay.
So I'm rolling him out, right? That's my point and shooting guard. This is 5. W.C. Handy, Robert Johnson, Muddy Waters. Game over there. Oh, I'm sorry, Sam Cooke.
I'm waiting.
That's
I'm
all the
waiting.
music there. I'm sorry, that's all the music. Oh, y'all was laughing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I told you.
Not a 6-man.
No.
Okay.
Tell you why. Little Richard said, there'll be no rock and roll without Rocket 88. Little Richard doesn't write Rocket 88. Because Rocket 88 is what told everybody what Fast Domino was doing. See, sonically, you couldn't follow Fast Domino. But Ike Turner writes Rocket 88. Now, little Ike Turner's inside. Ike Turner was supposed to be the person who found Elvis Presley. Because that was one of his jobs at Sun Records. Go find me a white kid who can dance and sing like a black dude. But Ike Turner being the pimp because it was kept taking black people to him. Like, I told you to bring up white dude. Yeah, but this dude is great. Ain't no white dude out there. Like literally, that's what Ike was doing. Like, he kept it. And so Elvis just kind of walks in off the street. Like, not found, but Sam, what was Sam's name? Sam Phillips. Sam Phillips had put out the car, and Ike Turner was the dude. Because the one thing, God, you can't say like from the past, from the future. I grew up in the barbershop. Same barbershop with old men. Ike Turner was in the barbershop. And every Saturday was the same argument. Come on, Ike, you know you beat that woman. No, see. And that was the whole, as a child, I grew up, so I knew Mr. Turner, Mr. Ike. All right? He took what Fats and all them were doing, basically swing jazz. Up tempo, gave it a backbeat. That's Rocket 88. Little Richard said the moment he heard Rocket 88 on the radio, he knew he was going to be. So those 5 people, right? But look how different they are.
That was 4, huh?
Ike Turner's the 5th.
Who was the 4?
Sam Cooke. Yeah, Sam Cooke. So that's, I mean, Smokey Robinson, although he kind of predates him, Smokey Robinson said he was trying to be Sam Cooke. Smokey Robinson, America's greatest poet, was trying to be Sam Cooke. So, with that, and so what Prince took from that, this is another lecture I give. Prince understood that human beings are pie charts with multiple slices. The problem is that most human beings think they only have 2 or 3 slices. And they generally revolve around money, sex, and eating. Those are your identities. And Prince is saying, like, nope, there are more slices to your pie chart. And with every album, both sonically and lyrically, Prince was opening me up. Now, luckily for me, although I became a Prince fanatic at 10, being raised in Clarksville, Mississippi, when you talk about the blues, first and foremost, you gotta talk about all of the blues women. See, that's first and foremost. And then we talk about all of the blues women and the blues women who played guitar. And the blues women who played guitar who were essentially signifying on spirituals. And Thomas Dorsey, by the way, so after W.C. Handy codifies the blues, they were playing the blues, but W.C. Handy makes it an art form, a thing called art form. Thomas Dorsey was supposed to be that dude. Like, Thomas Dorsey was going to be Robert Johnson. Yep. The problem is, Thomas Dorsey's son dies, and Thomas Dorsey runs to God. And I have no problem with that. But what does Thomas Dorsey do? He takes the blues to spiritual. So I love whenever old Christian people like, don't be bringing that old secularized music in the church. Like, clearly you don't know who Thomas Dorsey is. And the fact that I knew who Thomas Dorsey was about 12, when I was about 12, so when Kirk Franklin gets popular, and all the old black folks are mad about Kirk Franklin, like, you do know Thomas, you do know this is blues, right? So that's like those past slices that Prince for me, the new tour, right? One of the greatest moments, signifying moments, is Prince doing Muddy Waters' Electric Man. So if you ever get to see the Nude Tour, 1990 Nude Tour concert, Japan, Prince is doing his song, Question of You. And at the end of the song, he goes into Muddy Waters' Electric Man. Now, Prince had done the Electric Man chant earlier on the Parade Tour. It was all right. But when Prince does it then, not only does he make it clear that he knows who the hell Muddy Waters is, he's making it clear that blues is secularized spiritual. Because he's proven what Nelson George said, that Prince is able to communicate urgency and anxiety, both as a singer and a musician, like few other people can. So that everything that you're saying about all those indices, that's for me what Prince did. So like you say, when D'Angelo opens you up, that's cool because Prince gave D'Angelo the cheat code. When I say Prince gave D'Angelo the cheat code, that's not a negative. Bootsy Collins said that the one thing he appreciates with Prince is Prince legalized the funk. Because to truly, you would know, to love Parliament Funkadelic knows that they would never even get in their full due for who they were impacting because funk wasn't legal. All of it couldn't be played on the radio. But Prince takes the cheat code, gives it a little softening, right? That's why, and that's the part of the quote that people miss with Miles Davis, right? When I say that, you know, when Prince wants to make love to his woman, he is the drums. First part of that quote that they cut off is, Miles is saying, he says that Prince softened up the funk. He said that's what white people hear. They hear Prince softening the funk. He said, but because Prince softened the funk for them, what they don't realize is that, yeah, but Prince ain't trying to hear Reveal when he make love. He trying to hear drums. So he's saying, don't take the pretty chords, right? The question is, when you hear Prince, do you hear the pretty chords or do you hear the bottom? Mm-hmm. And I argue that real Prince fans hear both. But I know that there are some people who listen with segregated ears. Some people can only hear the pretty chords, and some people can only hear the bottom. And the best testament of this is the song, Do You Lie? Question, is that a soul song? And the problem is, musically ain't no way in hell that's a soul song. Musically. What about the vocal delivery? Prince is doing in that vocal delivery what Luther is doing, what Marvin is doing, what Smokey is doing, but you can't hear it. Why? Because it's on top of that Baroque style, classical style. That's the effing genius of Prince. Mixing those two things in a way. Why? Because, as the movie that just came out tells us, Chevrolet, that even doing that, there's African influences in every type of music on the planet. Final questions, thoughts, comments, concerns? Because I keep out here all day, but I do got to drive ahead class to teach. But I just want to thank y'all, man. This has been cool. I hope y'all got as much from this as I got from it. I'll end on saying this. I have a newsletter that comes out every Friday. I'm importing a short story writer by trade. So the information in that's what it's for. So we talk about people, poets, writers, doing things in Mississippi and around. It starts with a commentary by me, sometimes serious, sometimes silly, because the Confederates are trying to steal Jackson from black people. That's what I've been writing about a lot. They're trying to legally disenfranchise black people, trying to make it to where black people's vote don't count. So I've been writing a lot about that, but I write about funny stuff too. I write about Jackson State, I write about Hope, I write about my wife being the boss of the house. So you go to my website, Psychedelic Literature, email me, and I'll add you to that. Or just go to my website and just send me an email. I like chatting. I'm gonna shut up now, let y'all get on, we'll get some water, and then I'm gonna make my way on back to Mississippi. Thank y'all for having me.
Oh, wow. I know. So much. That was so great. Thank you very much. I have the homework for home.
There you go.
I know. I got a lot to do.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Remind me your name again? Nikki. Cecile. Okay.